Welcome, everybody, to the Selling Fort Collins podcast. I am here with Laura Arledge of State Design and Sean Tomlinson of Tomlinson Designs, two of the most talented people in this space in our entire area, in Fort Collins and beyond. So welcome, Laura. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being here, taking the time out of your busy schedules. And I think people are going to come away from this episode after we're done and get into some different things here with some really good ideas on innovative design. If they're wondering about remodeling their house or maybe building a new house, they'll have some ideas and maybe hear about what other people are doing, maybe hear about some materials they hadn't considered previously, some styles. We're going to get into all of that. But first, let's learn a little bit more about you two. Laura, tell us your background, and then we'll go to you, Sean.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for having me, Greg. So I actually was born in Minneapolis, and then we moved to Northern California, just about an hour north of San Francisco. And so my early childhood days were in Northern California. And then we moved to Denver in elementary school. And I grew up primarily in Denver and then came up to CSU for interior design school. So I've been actually here in Fort Collins, the longest place I've ever lived anywhere, for about 20 years.
I didn't know CSU Design School. So that must have been shortly after the design school opened then.
Well, no, it's been around for a while
people just maybe didn't know about it until more recently.
Yeah. And the remodel happened after I went. So that's all been redesigned. But
okay, I think that's when it was on people's radar after that big remodel there.
Yep. Yeah, I went when it was the old building still, the Aylesworth 1960s building, which was great. I went to school here and I got an internship my sophomore year at a design firm here, and then really just rolled right into design thereafter, working on commercial and residential projects primarily. So, yeah.
So started in commercial and then got into residential.
Yeah. And I started State in 2016, so 8 years ago.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So tell us, before we go over to you, Sean, tell us what are some of the commercial projects you started with? Because I believe you were with Blue Ocean.
I was, yeah. So prior to working at Blue Ocean, I was at another firm in Fort Collins, and we were working on their spaces. It was called Oglesby Sherman Design.
Okay.
And so, I started working on the OtterBox headquarters and actually was able to work on like the slide design and their HQ and some of their other properties, which was super fun. And then from there, actually left that firm, went to a different firm. And then when I was at the other firm, I got recruited to go in-house and start the design department at Blue Ocean. And so there I really worked on a variety of high-end commercial, hospitality, and residential projects.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, for those of you listening, Blue Ocean still is the real estate arm of OtterBox, which a lot of people have heard about OtterBox because they're the worldwide known company. They do the cell phone cases. I have one on my iPhone case here. So, I mean, that was a really big deal, working with the real estate arm of that huge firm, probably doing some large commercial projects, some interior stuff. How did that lead to residential?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think while I was there, we worked on some of their private projects, but we also worked with a lot of startup companies. And so I think that is what got me thinking more about entrepreneurialism and, how do I see really what I wanted to do was my own firm. And I kept thinking about how would that parlay into my own firm. And I think it was really just thinking about the commercial interiors and how do we, when I was there, create this sense of hominess and coziness that at the time it was very much kind of that Google era of, what are the amenities for these corporate offices and what are those special features that we can provide, from the coffee machines to the slides. But then as the design, I think, started evolving even in the commercial space, it was more about how do we make sure, and this was coming from Nancy too, that the employees felt like this was a second home and that it was very cozy and warm. And so I think what I started seeing was this bleed between commercial and residential projects where they don't have to be completely separate, that we can start to incorporate more soul and more of like a tactile quality into commercial spaces. And even then, I think it's come so far. And right now, you call it residential, the blend of those two things. But I think it was actually doing my own home that I really got into residential, because I think, starting out at CSU, the first day of school, they said, if you're here because of trading spaces, you're in the wrong you're in the wrong school. You're not coming for decorating, right? This is not about fluffing pillows. And that was great. I think I didn't really actually know fully what to expect until I got into the industry. But I think that side of it, of more of the tactile, the layering of textures, pillows, accessorizing, art, is what I actually got really excited about doing my own home, and then tried to kind of infuse that. And now we do a lot of hospitality and residential. So it's always got that kind of residential feeling to it. But it was kind of that blend, and just really getting to kind of test things out in my own home, which is my kind of laboratory.
Well, and that's what stands out to me about your work. You blend hospitality with residential. That's what we saw, my wife Sarah and I remember looking at your website a long time ago, and I saw this really cool boutique hotel that you did in, I think, Salida?
Yeah.
And the design was so unique. It was so warm. It was just so curated. I had never seen anything like it. And I thought, this is the person who needs to remodel our home and do our project. And that led to you doing that. And, we're in that now and looking forward to that being created. But that is what would I tell people when I'm talking about you, is that I've just, not come across somebody that is that good at blending the hospitality that you'll see in the commercial space with residential, and creating a unique, special environment that you're not going to see anywhere else.
Thank you.
When you walk
Thanks,
into
Greg.
the home. So,
and working on your house has been so amazing. I'm so excited about it. So.
Well, we appreciate you. And, Sean, there's a lot of things I think of you for as well. So let's get into your background and how you ended up where you are. And then we'll talk a little bit about the sale that took place recently here, and a little bit about that property.
I grew up in Seattle primarily, and experienced a lot out there. Different culture than here in Fort Collins, for sure. But grew up there, and then did school in California, undergraduate, went for other reasons, sports and stuff, and ended up getting a business computers degree, which I knew I wanted to do architecture, but it didn't work out that way in school because they didn't have that program. So then I went back to school and got a master's in architecture at University of Oregon. So still kind of on the West Coast there. And after that, moved out here to Fort Collins in 2004. And it was interesting moving out here because the culture of the use of designers and architects and interior designers on the West Coast and in larger cities was much different than here. And so when I moved here, I started kind of feeling it out. And I was working for a commercial firm, RB+B Architects, and working with them, which was great. But always had a passion for residential stuff.
Yeah, RB+B was more commercial, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So they do a lot of schools around here and office buildings, and great firm, had a great introduction to the area. But I always had a passion for residential work. And I think it's because I like understanding and seeing how people live and trying to kind of manipulate the space so it's a comfortable environment for them to live in, right? And so, so then I just kind of took the jump and went on my own in 2007. Had a couple of side projects. Well, I changed firms. I was with Justin Larson, who was with, it was before he was with VFLA, and before he passed. So I was with him for about a year and a half first, and then went out on my own and started doing projects right before 2008, 2009.
Great time.
Yep. But able to survive and get through that and keep going and build a relationship with contractors and real estate agents and interior designers and vendors and stuff that's made this area wonderful to work in. But in the beginning, it was different. It was a little bit of a culture shock because it was the area was run by like builders and developers and neighborhoods. And where I grew up, it was your neighborhood wasn't an HOA or like sectioned off by fences and stuff. It was just you lived in a neighborhood that was called, Leshai or Magnolia or something. And it didn't have an HOA and stuff. And so it just kind of was a blend of homes being built in different styles and different times too. And so, so it was a little bit different coming here. So I even went through CSU's small construction management program just to get a little certificate and learn more about the building techniques here. Building science has always interested me too. So and then getting to know the contractors to understand the environment.
Yeah. It was fascinating to me that you two both started in the commercial space and that you both went to CSU. CSU's been a common thread in a lot of the conversations we've had on this show, with professors and people that have been involved at CSU in different capacities. But it sounds like that played a pretty big part in both of you kind of launching.
I mean, you tell me, but you said a little bit in school. School doesn't push you towards residential. It
pushes you towards commercial, right?
I think it's more of a focus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember trying to get into residential studios in grad school, and I didn't get picked into them. And those were more of a multifamily type of residential type of project, not a single detached home type piece.
Yeah.
But I didn't even get into those. But yeah, the focus is not very much. And I don't know now. I mean, that was 20 plus years ago.
I don't think that's changed. I think it's, people like yourselves, your creativity is what pushes you into residential, your creativity and wanting to do and create different things. And that's kind of what I think of you for, I mean, this recent project on Fossil Creek, and I sold that home here recently, and the feedback that we got on that, I wanted to share one I haven't told you this yet, but my uncle is just a really impressive architect, retired, built a large firm in Minnesota, and he's been a mentor of mine and showed up to the open house I was telling you about, where he had over 100 people to that event. And he had a conversation with me at the start and said, I think this is, he's always very blunt, very direct. He's like, I think this is just overpriced. We were out front, and I was like, we'll see. He walks through, he spends a long time there, and then he comes back to me. He's like, this is way under, this might be underpriced. Might be, if people knew the value, if people knew the price of these materials. You were bringing, Sean, to that project the commercial know-how, the selection of materials. When you look at the windows, you look at all the different things, the concrete work, you look at the insulation. You were bringing a commercial know-how, I think, that background to that project.
Yeah, that was a very fun, unique project.
Yeah.
We had the opportunity to use and explore our materials. And fixtures and finishes as well on it that we don't always get the opportunity to. So that was, and thank you. That was really nice, your uncle, say that.
He's not easy to impress.
Oh,
You impressed him.
Okay, I'll take that.
You impressed a lot of people, not just him. I mean, people were raving about that. And, I guess the punchline of that story is that property sold for more than any home has ever sold for within the city limits of Fort Collins. So it's a record-breaking sale, and I think I guess I played some part in that. My name was on the PR release, but you are the person who did that. You designed that. You brought in the materials for that. You advised the owner on that, and just an absolute masterpiece, from the ground up. So big congrats on that.
Thank you.
And this talent that I'm lucky to be sitting in this room with right now, I think can help other people who are listening. Because we can talk about what are some things other people can do? And that's why, we usually, as I've shared with you, this is just kind of a conversational thing, but I want to have a little bit of structure here and just ask you some questions. And I want to hear the answers that both of you have. We can start with you on this, Sean, and then Laura will go back over to you. But, if someone is listening to this podcast, is going through the design process for their new home or a substantial remodel, what are 2-3 features that you might recommend to them, regardless of their design style? Just if they want to ensure they have a home that will appeal to the market if they would ever decide to sell in the future. What comes to mind, if anything?
Balance.
Tell us more about that.
That can come into play in many different ways, but one way that we out here with our views to the west and everything forget about is light balance. So natural light being brought from multiple sides of a room so you don't get light washing. Because everyone see the views to the west, and then the sun sets, and you're having these blinds up all the time and stuff. So, strategically placing windows and putting them in the right location to create that balance in a room makes it just feel softer.
Yeah.
In general, And then you can take that into, which is your area too, but in finishes. Yeah, I think there's a trend that's out there that's kind of fading a little bit. Everything was white and contrasty and stark. And, you'll see people now starting to bring in warmth and even colors of the year and stuff like that. Paint colors of the year are starting to have more warmth to them and stuff because it pushed people almost in that way. You go one way and then you go back the other and bring it back in what was lost. But yeah, bringing balance to it then I think can make it more comfortable, but also last longer as well. Yeah. And then that can be brought to size and square footage, and desires and pieces that you want in the house. There's always kind of this, oh, this is cool. Oh, I'd like to have this in this piece. And if you really put all that together, it starts to become maybe more square footage than you want.
Right.
And so having that balance of what's really needed, and then putting the quality and the craftsmanship into those pieces so it's comfortable and you can see it. I've always had this feeling that like people walk into a room and you just have this sense and you can tell the craftsmanship without being able to see the details. You don't have to know what a good trim carpenter can do, but you could feel it and you can see it in the space without knowing it. Right. And so, putting your balance of your fees and your structures into those to make it feel that way. And whether that's in the materials themselves or the room sizes or volumes of the rooms or where the windows are exactly located instead of having just a ton of windows, right? Placing them so that they're appropriate.
Yeah.
To do that. So
I love that answer.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's such a non-obvious answer. Like I wouldn't ever expect to hear that. Does anything else come to mind? That's a good one. I mean, I'll let you go. Let's kick it over. Let's kick it over to Laura. I mean, no pressure. That was really good.
That was a perfect answer. So, no, I mean, I would totally agree with you, and I think context is key too, right? Like, I think that making sure people aren't following a trend or what they're seeing online and copying and pasting that without paying attention to the context of like what are the bones of their home, what's the architecture saying. And making sure that I think that quality would come through then when you walk in the home, that you're like, okay, this is a one-of-a-kind home. It's not something that I see everywhere else. So I think that's why it's important to hire a designer too in remodeling, because not only can we help to avoid mistakes that could be caused in construction by just thinking through drawings and working through scale and proportion and lighting and space and volume and context and materials, but yeah, it helps to really differentiate the property so that when you walk into it, you can see that there's quality there and it's not like all the neighbors. Because I think what people are craving now is the story. And so they want to hear when they walk in that these cabinets were made by a local craftsman, or that the tile on your backsplash was made by a local ceramicist, right? And that we thought through. So I think like when we're designing, honestly, what we really don't design to think of resale, although that is a question that we ask. But I think that most of our clients are wanting to be in their home for a long time. It's either their dream home or they plan to be there for a while. And so the designs that we're doing are bespoke in reflection of the clients and who they are, and then in context to the home and obviously the functionality and the needs. But yeah, I think that's what we really try to pay attention to is what is being asked of us for this project and this client, and then pairing that up with form and function.
Yeah. I love that. Like the context. I mean, how do you respond to people when because one thing I get a lot in real estate is, hey, I'm thinking about remodeling our kitchen. And I'm thinking that, I sold them this house in 2013, 2017, whatever year it was. I remember it. I remember all the features. And I think, well, if you remodel just the kitchen, then everything else is going to look the way it does now. And the house was built in 2001 or it was built in 1994 or whenever it was built. But the context of that new kitchen all of a sudden looks very, very out of place. I think people oftentimes go through with that kitchen remodel and they look at that in a vacuum. And then they're surprised when they're done. They don't feel the way they thought they were going to feel, because when they walk into their house now, they're just noticing that the yellow oak in their living room that is adjacent to the remodeled kitchen is driving them completely crazy. So, just on that topic of context, how do you advise people, or do you advise people if they are thinking about just remodeling a room or two rooms inside of a larger house?
Yeah.
Question for both of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's our job, first of all, to understand like what is the scope? What does the scope entail? And then how do we bleed those together in a meaningful way if they say, I'm never going to do, a phase 2. But if it's something where, we just met with a client the other day and they want to do the kitchen as a first phase, but they also understand the value of a master plan and a master vision. And so that's where I think that comes into play, is really understanding, okay, this is phase 1, but where we want to get down the road, we don't also want to be spending money on things that would be changing in a phase 2 that we don't need to be paying attention to. So I think it's really just asking those questions and understanding what is the scope of work, and then how do we work with what are the givens, and asking the client, like, what is a given that is going to stay and won't be going away? And then what are the things that we have more flex with, so that we can marry those things together in what we feel like is the most seamless and design possible. And then presenting those to the client to see, okay, this is how this is going to blend with your existing, right? And showing the existing photos or walking in the home and seeing how that will blend together.
Yeah. And that gets hard too, because the kitchen, you use the example, is usually the one that's open to more spaces right now. The evolution of the kitchen, now it's so open. So it's harder to have that start and stop point. And we have conversations with clients like this all the time. Like, wonderful, you want to do the flooring. And then they talk about trim and other pieces to touch. And you kind of then have the conversation with them, where would you like it to stop? Down the end of that hallway, before the hallway, up the stairs, down the stairs. And so then it gets onto priority list, what you talked about a little bit, budget. So all those things kind of come into play, and and it's funny you bring up kitchen first, because I think it's one of the most complex ones. But you do have to have that, and we like to do the priorities. And if it is phasing too, because the priorities start dictating not just what can happen now, but also construction process. Like not redoing something. So number 8 might have to happen with 2, just because it'd be more money later to redo it or change that piece. So it is good to have that. If you are just touching one area, a little bit of a master plan, the idea of it, it does help kind of put things together in an overall scheme, and knowing where those start stop points are. Too.
Yeah. What's your end game? What's your timeline? And then what are your priorities? So that we can work towards this in the right order.
And in your area, sometimes we have clients, the end game's different. 2 years, then they're going to sell it. Or people forever home. And that changes our outlook on the design process too, a little bit, and the selections and where the focus is.
Well, it's interesting. I'm looking forward to bringing both of you into conversations with my clients more in the future, because I think they look to me for a lot of these things, and I can advise them to a degree. But a lot of times they're looking to me for advice on, like, hey, we just don't want to do anything stupid here. Like, it's a big investment. And so many people, actually a large percentage, I think, believe it's their forever home. Statistics show that it's usually not. And I think they know that on some level. And they're like, let me just not do anything crazy here that's really going to put us in a bad place. And so I think that's that high level, like, hey, what's your timeline? Like, I guess starting with the end in mind, and then what's your timeline, and then what are your priorities? Having that framework is helpful for people to hear. And then, talking with you two, I can't just really advocate enough for somebody having a master plan, not just attacking this and that and kind of going on their own. Talking with one of you is the best money they will ever spend in terms of getting preliminary plans and clarifying their ideas. So want to encourage everybody to do that. What about materials, features? What are some innovative features or materials that are becoming more popular in home design? And I think for people listening, I want to just point out that every market's different. Every place, if you're in California, it's different than if you're here in Colorado, northern Colorado, and sure it's different in other markets around the country and around the world. But here, what are some features, some materials that I think are innovative and exciting and timeless?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think number 1 is we look for authenticity of material. So when you're looking at materials and comparing, a plastic laminate on a fiberboard compared to a solid wood or a high quality metal or a handmade ceramic, I think there's something that is inherent with authentic materials that can evoke emotion and that are tactile and can connect you to them. And I think that's what we look for in materiality, is something that is, obviously there's a juxtaposition, right? Like if there's going to be a ton of wood, maybe you want to balance that out with something cool. But really looking to local artisans and makers, I think that's what's so exciting about where we're at right now as a design industry as a whole, is things that used to be a lot more kind of mass produced, right? And like you could find the tile that if you Google searched really easily. And now it's, for us, we really love working with local artisans. And there's enough local artisans, and there's so many talented ones, that we would rather work with someone on like, how can we custom design a cabinet that nobody has seen that cabinet door before? Or like the doors, doors going into a bedroom or into rooms. How can we design doors that we haven't seen in the area, that are very specific to the architecture and the style of your home and who you guys are and how you're living? But even ceramics, and working with, local ceramicists on how can we create our own tile. We don't need to go, we can go buy tiles, but I do think in general, we always look for the handmade and the things that evoke more character and more soul. And those to me are timeless because they have that story behind them and they're authentic materials versus, these like trends that may come and go that are they're what's quick and easy, right? Instead of what's made with your hands.
The archways that you designed at our house, that might be my favorite feature. I think that's what I think of when you talk about these things. It's timeless, but it's unique, and it's just, it's special. It was, done by local artisans. I mean, all of those checks kind of all those boxes. So, no, that's great. And Sean, what do you think? What are some materials, some features?
I think natural materials are starting to be brought back in, and replacing kind of mass produced stuff, even though some of the natural material is being produced pretty heavily. And I mean that by, you had for a long time fake stone being put in, and we have some wonderful quarries here that produce a ton of stone that is beautiful, and you can have a veneered stone that is a natural stone look.
For those of you listening, a veneered stone is just a thinner stone, right? You can't tell, so it's not as heavy.
It's real stone. Yeah. It's just cut to about 1.5 inches. It ranges because it's real stone on the thickness, but about 1.5 inches thick. Then that's applied directly to the surface and doesn't need a structural support on it.
Yeah.
Where real stone in the past used to be 4 inches thick and it needed a structural base to hold it up. And so, and I say a veneered stone is a real stone, and then they have a synthetic composite stone that's made of concrete that's painted. And that was done a lot before. And so you have these options to go more real, and even local too with it. And same thing with woods and wood products on the siding. You'll see a lot more wood siding on the exterior now. Maintenance of it is something, just to be there. But at the same time, you see that coming back, can bring you back more natural elements, I think, for sure. That's definitely something that's happening. And I think it feels more comfortable to people. And when you get that balance too of real wood, I mean, how many homes can you see with painted 6-inch lap siding, right? Or board and batten. It's kind of there everywhere too and stuff. So when you get this variety that's different, actually has like a soft feel and look to it as well, has more depth, that makes it pop and look a little bit more comfortable to people, and quite a difference. There is cost structures of stuff and maintenance of it too, which isn't always everyone's desire.
That's such a good thing to bring up. I think there's a lesson in there, and that's, so many people that might be doing some design things on their own, they might pick out different finishes in a silo. So, and then they might, put those together in a certain way, and not only maybe not thinking through how they look right next to each other, but to your point, like how do they actually attach? How is that going to weather? How is the wear and tear, the maintenance going to play out in year 3, 5, and 7? So just one additional way that you add value when you're meeting with people.
We did that same detail on a beach house in North Carolina. So it's getting hurricanes and weather and stuff too.
Oh, wow.
And so, they wanted the wood look and the constant of a fresh stain look. And so that's been sitting there for 4 years. 4 years now. Yeah. And it has the same look going through all the weather that it gets out there.
So that's impressive. That's impressive. I mean, how do you guys help people find their style? Everyone, like some of these things we're talking about, it depends, obviously on what somebody wants. I know a little bit about how you help people find their style. We'll maybe touch on that quick. It was interesting. My wife and I went through and just kind of made like a dream board, and then we it really just kind of let you all run with some of these things, and you came back with different themes that we could then choose from, if I'm remembering that process correctly. And I thought that was really innovative, and we landed on a theme that I don't think we would have landed on any other way. We were both unbelievably satisfied, thrilled about it. And I just, the science of this, the art of this, the combination of the two, I'm curious what your processes are for that. And you can answer first on this one, Laura.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. So like our process, if you remember the survey, we have two sides of the survey, right? Our left brain, science driven, analytical driven, function driven. What are your needs? So we call that programming in design. It's understanding what are all the puzzle pieces that we need to then assemble and put together in the floor plan. So more in a functional, driven way, right? Like what are all the things that you guys need? And so we'll create, we have a survey, and we have all of the questions that we ask you, drilling down into what are the things that you want to store in your cabinets. And how then that gets us thinking down the road about, okay, well, how do we design that kitchen to accommodate your needs? But in the very beginning, it's really broken down into the left side of the brain, the science driven, and then the right side, which is for us where we marry the science with the art. So it's how do you want to feel? If your home was a celebrity, who would it be? You guys said Javier Bardem, right? Like, so then it's analyzing those things. And then how do we pull and extract from that and pair it with a function and create something that we hope is who you guys are, right? Like, and then through that process of coming back to you and saying, well, I like this, I dislike this, then we just continue to refine that into a space that feels even more exactly like you. And that's where state comes from. So state is, what do you have to say? Who are you? And then how do you want to feel in your best, most inspired state, right? So it's like, it's all about our clients and who they are, what they have to say. And then what is that? What is that physical translation in an environment of what they have to say? So our goal is that every client, right, is different, because no two people are the same. So I love that kind of analytical side of it, of understanding who our clients are, sitting down with them, even seeing and hearing how they go through the process is different for every client. And we extract a lot from that. And then through the design process, we always go back to that survey, because for us, that's our why. So every time we're making a decision as to why do we choose the black wood cabinets in your kitchen, it's because of this. It goes back to this, right? We don't ever want to just do things because like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's nice. That's trending. It's really, who are you and how does this story go into you, into your home, of who you guys are. So that's what gives me a lot of meaning and depth in what I do, is it's very human centric, and it's focused on, how do we understand your lifestyle? How do we improve your lifestyle? How do we look at the little problems that you're experiencing today in your home and solve for that in the new design? I mean, it could be something as simple as, where is your paper towel dispenser located right now? And is that a pain for you? So thinking through, okay, well, if we can shorten your steps, if we can make your life easier, and you can go home and feel like this is the embodiment of me. I feel like I'm a better version of myself going out into the world every day. That's kind of our goal. And so anyway, that's a huge piece of what we do. And it's very a purpose-driven piece for me.
Yeah. Well, I've seen that process result. What comes out the other side there is a very unique product. Like looking at our place, it's these big white oak doors, these dark pine cabinets, these stainless steel commercial grade kitchen counters, these archways I mentioned earlier that look like they're out of maybe like an old church in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's bringing these things together in a unique way. I see so many places that are, expensive homes, 1.5 to 2.5 plus $1 million homes in our market. And so many of these, and they're nice and, as they should be, they are, but there's a lot of sameness out there. And I think, bringing that to the process of, how do you want to feel? And then attaching all of these, the science to it basically, and coming back to that throughout the process is really innovative. So if that's neat. Sean, what about you?
No, that's, I like it. It's nice. My firm, we have architecture and interior design.
Yeah.
So we tend to try and integrate those together.
Yeah.
Which I think is really important. Because in the architecture side, we're trying to understand movement and proportions in space and where people are going to be doing activities and how you're going to live and work and move in the space. And then the interior design part, coordinating together to make that tactile and the feeling piece work, right? And so that's why when I started my firm, I didn't have interior design. And even in grad school, I felt it was really necessary to learn more about it. And so all of my free time in classes and electives, I took in the interior design department to grab as much of that as I could. And so I started doing a lot of it myself with my first couple of projects. And then needed kind of to get more people on board and help. So that's why I first started hiring some interior designers to help out and work together on the projects. It's unique. Design is a perspective. I think everyone's different. I think everyone has a different personality. Everyone has a different like and want and needs. And so what some person likes, another person might not. And so in our realm, trying to figure it out, it's a lot of getting to know our clients. And you're right. There's different sides of it too. There's the program, the side that's what has to happen, kind of the program of the project. And then there's the feel and the tactile and the emotional side to it. We try and marry them through the process. In the beginning of it, it depends on the project, but in the beginning of it, it's really trying to understand our clients, and how they live and how they work and how they want to be, right? And that want to be is the big thing to me, because I think what people forget is that a floor plan kind of dictates our patterns, right? It tells you what's next to what, where you're going from one to the other, where things are even located. And if your process is different than that floor plan, you're disrupted. And sometimes people get really frustrated with it and they'll knock out a wall and it's like the best thing ever for them, right? And it was just one wall, but it was always in the way of what they wanted to do. And so what we try and do is understand our clients' life and how they move. Not just the activity of what it is, but what they do before and what they do after, the pieces that they need while they're doing those activities, the pieces that they're going to be left over with, or just everything that goes into the process. And what it starts to do is it starts to evolve these adjacencies. So hard adjacencies, soft adjacencies, what needs to be close, what doesn't have to be close. And then you combine that with the other parts of your site analysis, so views and solar orientation and weather and things that are around that you want to see and you don't want to see. And so it's like this big, we just call it our big architectural bucket that we put all the stuff into. And it's a puzzle trying to figure it out, right? But that's where the floor plan then starts evolving around our client. Instead of the other way around, which I found that was a hard thing for me when I first moved here. And I mentioned that earlier, was that it was kind of, okay, here's your house of 4 bedrooms, 5 bath, open concept. Mm-hmm. Great. And it looks pretty and the finishes are nice. And it's on this property that has views. But I think there's a lost aspect to that of, does it fit how you move and how you live, right? Because they can move into it and it could be a beautiful house, but it doesn't fit their life. And those are the people that move out in 2 to 5 years, right? Because it doesn't fit them and they feel like they have to move on or go to a different space because it's not adapting to their lifestyle, right? And so we try and grab that when we're doing it so that that house isn't done in 2 years, 3 years, or that remodel's not obsolete anymore.
Maybe what their life is, and there might be an aspirational component here too. I've seen a number of newer floor plans that have the media room separate from the kitchen and the living room. And I think this is intentional because more people are wanting to be intentional about watching television. If they're going to turn on the TV, they want there to be a reason. It's going to be a movie, it's going to be Netflix, but it's going to be planned. It's not going to be on autopilot, flipping on the TV to watch the game. And then, I'm kind of cooking. And then, well, here we are 90 minutes later. I don't know that I consciously made a decision to be watching the TV, but it's aspirational. So they're making this floor plan kind of conform to this person they want to be, who is maybe watching a little bit less TV, maybe having that media room in a separate space. Yeah. So I don't know if you two have seen that, but I've seen a few things like that.
I agree. And I think honestly that coming out of COVID and COVID experience, mm-hmm. it changed how people interacted and occupied their houses. Right. All of a sudden, everyone was at home. Right. And so we got calls to change things to make working at home easier and offices and stuff like that. But what I really think it did, besides those kind of immediate needs, was change the focus on what happens in the house. And when it used to be like everyone was gone, you come home, so you wanted to do everything together. Right. So the open concept, the kitchen, you're doing things in there. The kids are on the counter, they can watch TV. You're connected to everything all at once. Right. And I think COVID, with everyone at home, it was no longer, I don't want to be connected to everything at once because I need my break. I need a little bit of my space. And that was the office first, because you couldn't, have a Zoom conference call with kids in the background and stuff, right? Or whatever it was. And so that became separated. But then I think it made everyone examine a little bit more of their lifestyles. I know in my house and everything, TV kind of became less of a focus.
Yeah.
And we started doing more stuff outside and more intentional pieces and things. And so then that TV watching, I think, just like The Office and stuff, needed maybe a little bit more of its own space instead of being the center focus. And that's, the media room, whether it is like a direct media room of theaters and stuff, or just a den now. Right. We're doing actually more sitting room dens that are more of a quiet space. Trying to get away from everything there, like letting your eyes and your body relax. We're seeing more saunas too, more meditation spaces, or like gyms, or like spaces that are kind of more quiet away from that.
Yeah.
As well.
What about outdoor amenities? Are you seeing, one of the national trends in the luxury category has been pickleball courts, which is fascinating. You wonder how many neighbors are complaining about them.
I grew up in Seattle where pickleball was. I played it in like elementary school.
Oh, did you?
Wow.
In the gym. Yeah, we
you're
played
a
in the gym.
good player.
Yeah.
We had my street. We had a net that was 2 poles in concrete and tires with a net strung, and we had the kitchen and the baseline with asphalt lines, and we'd push the net down and cars would drive over and put it back out when we play. So
awesome.
it was, so then when it came back, it was like, oh yeah, this is great. I remember this.
Oh, that's funny. I mean, it's clearly been a huge trend nationally. I love pickleball. I know you love pickleball. We've played together at the country club. Around here, I haven't seen, many private pickleball courts. I have seen a few. What are some outdoor amenities that both of you have seen? Because, I think we're Colorado, 300 days of sunshine a year. It's a great place to have outdoor space, especially if it's done thoughtfully. I think a lot of people might make big investments and be like, oh, I'm facing south. Turns out pretty hot out here in the summertime. Or, the other way around, they wish they had more sun at certain times of year. So what are some trends you're seeing in the outdoor space?
We're seeing more of there's always been a connection. And people always talk about a 3-season room.
Yeah.
We're seeing more of an adaptation of that where you can use it more often. But if it is facing south or if it is facing west, doing more architecturally so that it's comfortable. So you have that connection, the indoor-outdoor. And that's being accomplished also by some of the products and technology that we have. Like in the house you sold, there's 2 doors in that house that are 16 feet and 12 feet wide that completely slide into the wall. So you don't even see them. So that is completely indoor-outdoor of that space and 0 threshold and stuff. So the step on the doors. But more of that connection to the outdoor space from the inside being more accessible and usable. That's really big. And then some of that quiet space, like heat lamps somewhere you can sit where you normally wouldn't be able to, fire pit.
Meditation gardens.
Yep. And connection then to what's happening in landscape, right? More of natural sounds like waterfalls, even their small ones or something, and natural paths, not so much concrete everywhere either, right? Softening up. But I'm not a landscape architect at all, but we see it and we connect with it, and we try and bring the house into it. Cause that's we've done several projects recently where it's been these outdoor spaces connections
Yeah.
to it. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Laura? What are you seeing?
Yeah. I think just making it continuous, outdoor in, indoor out. So it becomes all one larger living environment. And then I know you've talked about ADUs before, but having, a cool little pocket ADU, whether it's for an art studio or an office or a little getaway. But yeah, I think just integrating the outdoors in, indoors out, so it feels seamless. And then also just seeing gardening, I think too, just more people interested in farm to table and having gardens of their own and bringing that into their kitchen, So I think that's always a really cool feature that is sustainable and just helps bring life from the outdoors in.
Yeah. I love that. The garden's a big one that I'm seeing too. A lot more gardeners. I think that might have started or at least picked up a lot during the COVID times. What are some of these trends, whether interior or exterior, that are short-lived? And you can go first in this one, Laura. What do you see that you think, 2028, it's going to be over. 2032, it's going to be over. Maybe who knows how short-lived, but you think it might be short-lived.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I'm probably inundated with trends and take them with a grain of salt. So I would say,
don't say stainless steel countertops in kitchens.
No. I'm like, what is it? I'm trying to think, like, what could it be? I guess I'll flip it and tell you one trend that I'm seeing now that I actually really love. And I was just telling someone about this. They're called quiet ceilings, right? But it's just the idea that there's just not lighting all over the place. Because I think for a while there was can lights everywhere. And so what I love and where the trends are going that are in a positive direction are layering of light and people being very aware of not too many overhead lights so that it feels warm and cozy and tactile and it doesn't wash out your face and make you look like you're pale or sick. So, I think that's one trend I'm really liking. I think one that I'm not liking, I don't know. Tell me what the trends are.
How about you, Sean? Do any come to mind?
I don't know. It's hard not to put personal preferences in it, right?
Yeah.
Because there are things that that I like that other people might like or not like. I think there's a little bit more of a focus on some more natural products now, and the production and the less use of chemicals too, possibly. And so I don't know if that's going to put other things out and make them trendy, but I think there'll probably be, more availability of stuff that's less of a chemical imbalance in our house, I guess, put it that way. LVT is one that got really popular, putting it because it can look like anything, and it became visually something that looked nice and looked like wood floors or looked like pretty much anything you want.
Luxury vinyl tile flooring. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you. But you mentioned natural products and stuff, and I'm in agreement with that. It's plastic, and so it can work in some areas, and it is water resistant and stuff, and it can be great. But is it really the solution for everything and everywhere? So I think I see maybe a trend going in that way of having more natural products and that feel. I'm not as adaptive as the interior products, and I think that's where this tends to go a little bit on where, because you're feeling them and touching them, you're seeing them, and you walk into a house, and that's kind of what you interact with more. But I do think that there's a little bit of a movement and focus on that.
Yeah. I've talked to people a little bit about, when they're asking my advice, just not being too careful to not make mistakes, not being
Yeah.
too worried
Yeah.
about playing it safe. Because what happens when you do that is what I think a lot of people did, going back not too long ago when everyone was like, hey, I want to make sure I have something I can sell here. So let's go with a light gray everywhere. Let's go light gray undertones in the floors, the luxury vinyl plank. Let's do light gray on the wall. And then you walk into just this sea of gray. Well, guess what?
Right.
That's what
It's gonna
everybody's
go
doing.
away. Yeah.
And what happens when
Right.
everybody's doing
True.
it? What
True.
happens next?
True.
That's when it's dated.
Yeah.
That's when it's not on trend. So I think that just kind of, getting some of the advice out of your two answers, it's, just really be authentic to you, going with natural things that tend to be a little bit more timeless.
Yeah. And I think that's where I was coming from is I don't try to look at a trend and say, I'm going to do that because it's a trend.
Right.
I think that it's easy to see, okay, yeah, these things are happening a lot. And so they become trends, but to not do something because it's a trend, but staying still true to who you are and or what the house is saying, what the architecture is saying, and that will be timeless, right? Instead of just doing something because that's a cool trend right now.
Right.
Yeah, I would advise against that.
Yeah. I think bringing some of your personality into it.
Yeah.
You can do that in the architecture, you can do it in the interior design, but don't be afraid to.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're going to be living there for a while, let it be you and your enjoyment of it. And in most of the situations that we've done where that's happened, it's been some feature that has really stood out then and been something great in a project. A lot of the fun features in some of our projects have been more of a collaboration of the client like wanting something, but not exactly how to say or state or sketch it or draw exactly what it is. But, they'll show us precedent images and stuff, and we'll kind of get feelings and ideas of what it is. And then it evolves into some great feature that they're like, this is great. And then people notice it and see it. And if it wasn't there, if it's playing it safe and not kind of expressing that, then it wouldn't be there and it wouldn't make it as kind of unique.
Yeah. So as when you're going through this, your clients are going through this process with you, it's like, don't be afraid to speak up.
Right.
Like that's some good advice for you. Don't be afraid to speak up and see where it goes. I also wonder, are you seeing more of a demand, maybe more people appreciating, seeking out, willing to pay for energy efficient features?
Yeah. I think our code's also pushing things in that direction.
Certainly. When it comes to things like, when it comes to like the windows that were in that Fossil Creek house, amazingly energy efficient. When it comes to solar panels or increased insulation, are these things that you're seeing people ask for or seek out to a higher degree than recent years?
That is yes and no. It's client specific. Yeah. And so the ones that want it, definitely we talk about it and determine our best kind of envelope that we're going to build. An envelope meaning their installation in the construction of the wall, and where the weather barrier is and where our insulation is in the code dictates different ways of doing it, meeting the certain R values that the wall has to meet, or the roof or the ceiling or the floor. But certain clients are a lot more aware and will use certain products to get that done. Where other ones don't show or express much interest into it. And then we can help evolve that so that their house is more efficient without them even kind of having not a say, but a direct say, hey, I want this, with shading and window placement, right? Solar orientation, also colors, exterior colors. You can do it. Black's very popular, but black also absorbs a lot of heat and makes it harder on your insulation that you're trying to protect the house against. Heat transfers. So I bring it back to to us, it's been more of a client focused thing. Mm-hmm. And then we adapt how it is, but we can integrate that and do those pieces without their direct say of, yes, I want this, so that their house is more energy efficient and more comfortable. Because to me, when we do it where it's more energy efficient, it's more natural, it is more comfortable. You're not relying on mechanical systems as much to keep your warmth or your comfort zone, right?
What's fascinating is you're approaching it more from, you want people to be comfortable. And in line with that, comes energy efficiency. It maybe shouldn't be like 12 degrees warmer, in an upstairs room than it should be in a downstairs room. So designing it for that. And in terms of people willing to pay for it, it's fascinating. I have a listing right now that's $1 million plus listing in Old Town, and there's some really cool solar panels on the home. And the question that I'm getting, I just had an open house this past weekend. I think every single person asked this question. They said, "Are the solar panels owned?" And how I interpret that is, hey, glad the solar panels are there, don't want to pay for them. The answer they want to hear is, yeah, they're owned, so I don't have an ongoing payment associated with these solar panels. So if they like them, they appreciate them, are they willing to pay for some of these things? I don't know if the market is quite there yet. I guess to your point, it's person specific.
But I mean, you can tell me on this too, but that's kind of a new thing with the home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not many other things would have an ongoing non-ownership or payment once you sold the house, right? So that I mean, I think that's relatively new to your market of like, that answer to that question.
Yeah, it's fascinating too, because you would think the follow-up question might be, well, do they offset the utility expenses?
Right.
I haven't gotten that question. I have the utility bills on there ready, so I can prove that they do, that it's great. And I think that it's a wonderful thing that they're there and a great component of the home, but I don't get that follow-up question. I just get, is that something I'm going to have to pay more money for, is the underlying question in their initial, are they owned or are they leased? So just it's an interesting just little side note. But what about you, Laura? I mean, what are you seeing from people in the energy efficiency category, kind of what they're seeking? I think you saw how excited I got about upgrading the insulation on our exterior south-facing walls. I put it on social media. I'm not sure if anyone else thought it was interesting or not, but I'm absolutely giddy about it to this moment. What else are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of energy efficiency, sustainability, and use of local materials is what we're seeing. And maybe those go in tandem, or maybe it just depends on the project. We're working on Virgin hotels in Denver, and they're highly sustainable and really into sustainability. And so we've got all the checklists and things that we are working through. And then it's also City of Denver. So that's really exciting to work with a client that I think values sustainability and values use of local materials, and saying, we also care about, where did this come from and how is it getting to our site, instead of just, this looks pretty and let's fly it from halfway around the world to get it. So yeah, I think that's what I'm seeing is people who are aware and conscientious of the materials, where they're coming from, how are they made, what's the chemical composition, like how, what am I breathing? What are the off-gassings? Is this healthy for me? And then, energy efficiency, I think it can vary, but I do think that it probably just depends more so on the client, and they probably do want to know, what is that offset like life cycle cost versus just the first initial investment, right? So if that life cycle cost can help to balance the initial investment, and if that can offset it within a short period of time, I think people are probably more interested than, oh, that's a 20-year payoff, right? So yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing. Is it's more on the, I would say, at least in our industry, materiality, even working with local furniture makers, instead of let's fly in furniture from this warehouse that's halfway around the world.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
It's interesting that people are thinking about that. I think that's probably new. That has to be a newer thing. People even,
I think a lot of it's social media too.
Where is it coming from?
I think a lot of it's social media awareness. And obviously depends on the client too, but a lot of residential clients are more aware of where things are coming from, and really trying to honor local artisans and makers, and not buying things mass produced, and just where we are in the world. I think, people care about contributing to small business. And that's what we are too. And so naturally we probably want to do more of that and grow the small business, grow the local economy if we can. And we are kind of the leaders in that, right? So like, we have the choice. Do we push for sustainability and energy efficiency, whether the client's asking or not? And that's what I think I'm always looking at is like, well, how can we go above and beyond? They may or may not know it, but to try to be just good stewards.
So let's talk about where people can go wrong, where they might spend more money than they planned, where things can go sideways. What are some areas that you see people start to get off track, start to get into expensive mistakes? Sean, you can go first on this one.
I think I touched a little bit about it earlier, and that's, all these wants and desires and trying to have as much as possible in their house. And then it leads to too much square footage. And I also think that's a little bit of a byproduct of our area with basements. We had basements in Seattle growing up, but I've also lived in Arizona where there's no basements and slab on grade there. But is square footage, I think that all of a sudden combined with your programming, because you want the stuff that you use most of the time on your level or your main level or close by. And so then your footprint starts growing. We have conversations about this during the design process stuff, and then it goes, volume and up and down too. And all of a sudden you're at a much larger house overall square footage than you wanted. And then that translates into overall budget and cost. And so I think it gets tough sometimes, on that part. And that's where we've gotten into situations where we have conversations, you go through it with them. They still kind of have reasons of why they want things and that. And you get to a point when we halfway through our design process, we usually do we call it a preliminary bid set, like a feasibility study, right? Where we'll have more hard numbers on selections and stuff, and interior design pieces and fixtures and appliances. But then the construction side of it is more soft numbers by historic and stuff. We usually have a contractor help do this and price it out, and it'll come back and it's more than they wanted to. And it's basically primarily because of the square footage just getting bigger and bigger of all the stuff. And so to me, that's where that balance piece comes into. It's like trying to set those priorities of what is really the pieces that you want in the house. Because then trying to value engineer backwards is much harder. And in our practice, we have a risk table that we keep track in our project management software. So in decisions and pieces that happen like this, we'll write them down in our risk table so that if it comes to the situation of talking about things, we're like, okay, remember this piece and this, and, we had conversations about this. And so it reminds people of those conversations so that we can maybe value engineer a little bit easier if we need to. And value engineer, I mean, cutting the expenses by changing either design or selections or finishes and stuff.
Getting costs down.
Yep. Bring it down. I'd say that's probably the biggest rabbit hole that gets people is those wants and desires, and that gets into bigger square footage.
So maybe just not having like really extreme clarity on the end goal, on what the end. It seems like that's what I'm hearing. There are people maybe start down this and they just don't have real clarity on the end goal and haven't maybe thought that through or gone through a process to.
And I look at it as our job to help rein that in too, because we look at budget as two things when we talk to people. Is one, can it happen? Mm-hmm. And two, it's a design parameter, right? It's what we need to design around and within. And if we're not doing that diligently, that's our fault. And we've, but if it's being pushed outside, we're having discussions and reasons why, and then it comes back and it's more because of some of these bigger things, then that's, again, we're trying to lead the design process. So we're trying to help with that, but it's not my house. I'm not going to live there. So I'm going to give my professional opinion and piece to it. But in the end, it's our client's house, right? And I look at that in a lot of design aspects with them too. I'll refer to ourselves as their tool. Like if you need to put a nail in a piece of wood, use a hammer. We're the tool to get out of their needs of this house or remodel or change or adjustment. And we're the profession and the professionals to go to help them get that, right? So it's our responsibility as well to do that. We've had some projects that we need to rein in and value engineer, and there's different reasons for each one of them. But I do think that's a tough rabbit hole that happens a lot of times.
Well, that's just such a huge reason to engage you. Just setting those guardrails, helping them get clarity. I think when people are getting in a bad situation, a lot of times they're probably not working with somebody like you. And, conceptually, if they are, they're mitigating those risks of those things happening to a very, very substantial degree. So, what about you, Laura? What about the inside of the house, the interior design? Is there anything there with the interior that you really think of when you think of a place people get in trouble when they start, things go wrong, things go over budget?
Yeah.
Precedent images.
Yeah. I would say early on, no, it is funny that people will come to us and say like, oh, I like this, I want this, but that doesn't happen so much anymore, which is kind of nice. They allow us the freedom to create something unique. But I do think it goes back to just budget and timing, right? It's like, how can we create allowances that after we get a good understanding of the scope of work and really what's approved, how do we create these allowances to work within? Because then we can push and pull. But again, like you said, the guardrails, knowing what those guardrails are, and then being able to go back to the client and say, hey, we found this really great thing. It's a little bit more, but we can balance the budget by reducing the cost over here. So what do you think about that? And I think that's just really, it's helped us create successful designs, is being able to execute on something, knowing from the beginning. I think, Sean, you mentioned, having a bid set and just having really key intervals with contractors where you get pricing and you see where things landing. And then you can continue to detail and refine and go from there, or pare back the scope and value engineer, So I think, it always kind of goes hand in hand with time, budget, and just overall design intent and client priorities.
Yeah. And just understanding what their priorities are.
Right. Yeah.
You helped us a lot. And I know you do this a lot too, Sean, with understanding space needs, understanding, all right, you're going to do this here, you're going to do this here, after you really ask the questions and figure out how the people are going to live in the house. And I think if there's clarity there, it does seem like people kind of have that end in mind of kind of where they're going and stay on track a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, Sean, if something is going to cause disruption, say you're doing a demo on a main level and you have to get into the plumbing on the lower level or whatever it may be, HVAC or infrastructure, I think just understanding what that looks like in the beginning to be able to have those conversations to say, you know what, we're going to be tearing out your drywall downstairs. So does it make sense to just finish all of the drywall at once? It's going to be this added cost, but now your whole house is going to be consistent. And I think that's actually one tip or trick. I don't know if you'll get to this later or not, but I think that one thing people maybe don't pay attention to enough is the drywall texture finish in their walls. And when you come in, you do an addition or a remodel, not looking at the consistency between what was there and what's new. So that's something that I really look at a lot, is just how do you create a texture that's consistent with the original, if it's a remodel or an addition, or if you're doing a new construction, that it's a smooth, nice drywall or a hand trowel drywall. It's a really nice finish that is there's new technologies that I think are coming along and progressing in drywall, that it doesn't have to be like a traditional knockdown or an orange peel anymore, right? There's just so many new finishes with that too. So, but yeah, I think just having those conversations with your client and understanding, and then it's our job to look at the big picture and say, hey, we really think you should invest over in this area because you don't want to have to do this down the road.
Yeah. What are some low cost things that make a big impact? I think, I guess it depends how much drywall finishing you're doing. I mean, that is a huge difference that people, I think, really underestimate, is if you do a really cool drywall finish, like you're going to have a completely,
it can change
transformed
the whole
space. Yeah. And you have a whole different feel, and it can be really amazing. What are some maybe, lower cost things, we can call it tips and tricks, but if someone is looking just to, hey, I want to start, doing some things. I don't want to do a full remodel yet, but what comes to mind?
For me, it's lighting. Okay. So one of the things I always look at is making sure that your color temperatures are the same throughout every fixture in your home. And we recommend 2700 Kelvin. It's a warm white, but you don't want some blue fixtures and some yellow fixtures. So having everything be that same color temperature, it's going to give off just a cozier, higher end thoughtful, layered look. And then it's controllability too, right? Like you don't have to have all these overhead lights on at one time. You could just choose to turn on a floor lamp that gives you nice face light and is cozy for reading a book. So I think layers of lighting, so overhead lighting with floor lamps, table lamps, and accent lighting for art and other features. And then I would say flooring and paint. So yeah, whatever that may be, whatever's appropriate to your home, if it's hardwood floors or tile or carpet, upgrading that. And then paint, I mean, you could DIY that. So, but I think just a refresh on paint, yeah, textures, kind of getting the shell and the bones right. Then you can always layer in furniture and other things over time. But getting the bones right is number one.
Yeah, that's great. Sean, do you have any?
Oh, I totally agree about lighting. We've revamped our whole lighting approach with layers, and we'll try and do a lot of projects now without can lights. I mean, there's a lot to say about lighting and how it needs to happen, and that could even be a whole nother podcast if you wanted to. But I do think that's a good fix in the way, color light's really important, and the way we have manufactured light now. I think what gets lost in that a little bit, at least it was when LED bulbs started coming out, was the full color spectrum, because you had your manufactured lighting bulbs and stuff not producing as much red or yellow. And so then everyone thought that these light bulbs weren't as good, because in an incandescent bulb, it's a burning filament. So it's a full color spectrum. So in the produced light bulb, we have to create that color spectrum. And so having a CRI of 90 or above helps, because then that red and yellow, which is harder to produce, starts coming into play. So lighting really can, but you're right. Table lights, side lighting, layers, edge lighting, it's amazing when people put up like Christmas lights in their house, and it's like over openings or across a beam or something. Everyone's like, "Oh, that's so nice." Well, that's kind of the great example of edge lighting, right? And putting it on the outside, and we just do it once a year, but there's ways of bringing that in. But as far as like inexpensive or quick fixes stuff, paint is great. Paint you can touch up scuff marks, dirt, holes, drywall, stuff like that with paint, and it works really well. If you are a little bit DIY yourself, trim, even redoing some of the trim, that could make a big difference. So many of the homes around here, built to have small trim. And if you change it with a little bit of profile or built up, or just even simple, larger, just a square edge, east edge, that'll do a lot. And if, again, you can go down the domino of, well, I'll redo the trim or I'll redo the floors, and, that can then get to baseboards and do stuff, because then you have that gap if you put in a smaller floor. So there are pieces that compound, but at the same time, I think these ones are simple and easy to do. Furniture, plants. Yeah, plants do a lot.
Those are all good ones. Two things that are not low cost options, but I think have made the largest difference, I think, proportionally to what I anticipated. I wonder if you two have seen the same things, but the number one thing was windows.
Windows, yeah.
When we did
for sure
new windows at our place, I wasn't excited about new windows. I just thought, well, great, they're going to be more energy efficient. In the same way I was excited about the new blown-in insulation, I was excited about the windows, but I didn't know they would transform the look of the space the way they did. I mean, the windows absolutely transformed the way the house looks. Have you two seen that in your designs?
Yeah, that's a huge one, because it's the integration with outside too, and natural daylight.
Yes.
And it is kind of the picture that frames your house from the outside and the inside. So it's like framing the view looking out. Mm-hmm. And it helps to identify the architectural style. So with your house, I know we really changed the architectural style from one style to a completely different style. So that helps to characterize that. It creates that character windows and doors do. Yeah. So I think that's a huge one.
Yeah. Affordability wise, yeah, windows. And there's different levels of windows too you can get, right? The what they're made of as far as in panes of glass. And then our climate, depending where it's made, if you can get gas in there or not to help with insulation. But then some are thicker on the frame too than others, so you get either more visibility through the window, through the glass area. or not. And then your style, your mullions and grids possibilities in the windows too can totally change the look of the house.
Right. It's fascinating, like where it's going. I'm always future focused and wondering kind of where the things will come from. When I look at some of the energy efficiency conversations and the lighting and some of these things, I did see some of those things a little bit more on the commercial side, and then people, like the quality, they like the energy efficiency, and they want that comfort level in their home. But yeah, it's fascinating to see where the future goes. And, I guess just on that note of where we're going in the future, one thing that I hear a lot from my clients, and I wonder if you two do as well, is, should we do this? Is this going to be a good investment? Are we going to be able to get our money back? These concerns. And increasingly, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on this, but increasingly my answer to them is, you're good. Like you're going to be fine. The affluence that is continuing to land in Fort Collins, the people who could live anywhere in the world and are moving to Fort Collins, just very impressive people. The tech sector, the healthcare sector, large international companies like Woodward Governor hiring, bringing people from all over the world, higher paying jobs than we've seen. And then that ultimately, interestingly enough, brings the older generation, these young professionals' parents who want to be closer to their kids and their grandkids. The snowball effect I'm seeing of increased affluence here and the prices going up, the demand for quality increasing is fascinating. And I'm wondering if you two are saying the same thing, because part of me does not want to be the real estate agent who is telling them, yes, spend the money, do the big thing, don't worry about it. I'm curious what you're seeing.
I mean, I think just your sale of those two properties is proof that design and investing in your home is a good investment, especially in Northern Colorado. And I don't feel like I've seen one case where people haven't really gotten their money out of it. Yeah, you might have to hold on to it for a little bit, but even then, I feel like if you are investing in quality, authentic materials, good design, and it's a space that functions and is an improvement upon what it was, I feel like real estate is one of the best investments in design. And not only that, but it improves people's lives, right? Like it's our sanctuary. It's where we work now. It's where we live. It's where we raise our kids. So for me personally, I mean, I see what a huge investment it is. And there's no question for me personally that it's a good investment, because it's just the foundation of how we live our lives, right?
Right.
But yeah, I think just the market trends and what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from you too, and watching you, is just that things continue to rise. And I don't know if that's because of just the inflation, right? Like, I think that's a question you talked about before, is like, is it inflation? Is it are people building bigger homes? And you could speak more to that too. But yeah, I think that's what I'd be curious about, is as these sales start to turn over, how is the design and architecture kind of playing into that turnover and that sale and that value? Mm-hmm. I'd be curious to know.
Well, it's fascinating. I think, that's brings up a point. And I think of a person that came through the open house on the Fossil Creek home, Sean, and this quality product there you mentioned earlier, the huge heavy glass doors that fold completely into the wall and bring the inside out and the outside in. It's just absolutely stunning. And one of the guests at the open house, she had just moved here from California, and she was in a very expensive market in Northern California. And she said, this would sell for 22 to 24 million. She was very specific on the price range. Yeah. 22 to 24 million if it were in my market. And then I'm just fascinated. I'm like, well, my underlying immediate question was, why are you here and looking at this house? And she wasn't really in the market. She was just curious. But the answer to why she was here in Northern Colorado is she has a son who works in the University of Colorado Healthcare assistant at the campus there. He's a physician, a son-in-law who's at CSU, a daughter-in-law who's in the tech sector with Broadcom. So just talking to her, it's very, very fascinating that this person who is there in this market where that property is selling for 22 to 24 million is now here, is now living in this market, and maybe casually just browsing this home, but just very, very fascinating. And I think the part of the answer to that question, Laura, is it's a different type of person because of all of the things we have going on here with this robust local economy, this thriving university, the 300 days of sunshine, the trails, the 6 mile long Horsetooth Reservoir, all of the things, just the quality of life is special and less and less of a secret and pulling people from all over. But the thing that not enough people are talking about that is interesting to me is that I think people know that the median age of home buyers across the country is going up. In 2024, the median age of home buyers is going to be, I think it's about 56 years old, which is the oldest ever. The age of first-time home buyers is up to the highest age ever of 38 years old. So some interesting stats there. And so, people are just who are buying homes are older and wealthier. This market is increasingly pulling these people here. And, I think we're going to see more of that because they want to be close to their sons or daughters who are employed at these exciting places, and maybe their grandsons and granddaughters that are going to CSU, the largest state university. So,
yeah. Well, it goes back to quality of life. Like you were mentioning during COVID, I think people have been moving away from the coasts and into wherever that may be here, the Midwest, to be close to family and to have the quality of life. And people can work remotely now, right? So like if you can have all those things and not have to feel like you have to live on the coast, it just naturally, I think, is going to increase the values.
Yeah, and you're coming from a place where, what you're seeking, the quality, the home, the neighborhood, the lifestyle, it costs $9 million and you can get it for a much lower or whatever it is. I mean, the price point is still much less than in these coastal areas.
And if you tell people who lived here their whole life that, they're like, wow, the price has gone up a whole bunch, right?
Yeah.
Because relative to what this town was, 30 years ago.
Right.
It's a big change.
It's all context. And so you take that all the way back to the people who are asking this question of, should I do this? It feels like a big investment. I think understanding the affluence that's settling here, what the future is looking like, and the context that these people have that are coming and looking at their home that they put this money into, made a nice investment, engaged one of you two to do an incredible new build or a remodel or just really make their place special, that buyer is going to be out there in a way that they weren't before.
Right. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah. And I think that, each project's unique.
Yeah.
And the desires of a remodel or new construction or a change should invoke that question, though, a little bit of pieces of how long am I going to be here with this, right? If it's a couple of years, do you do that really abnormal, different, crazy thing? Right. I don't know. It depends on what it is or what it isn't. But I think just a quick evaluation of it still is maybe a good exercise. I mean, yes, we live in an amazing area and we've been really lucky and great to experience what's happened here. I don't know. I just think my natural inclination is to always be like, all right, this is what's going to happen. This is what you want to do. Let's take a look at it. And, I mean, for real estate for a long time, it was always that the primary bathroom always had to have a tub, right? And how long did that kind of take to like shift out and stuff and things? And I just think that there's some of that sediment maybe still there of like what can or shouldn't be, but I don't want to discourage people from doing things. Earlier we were talking about bringing your personality into the project. I definitely think that's great. I think personality is going to bring more into a project than just more space or doing something bigger, right?
And I think that's also a way that more people will come to Fort Collins is if they can see properties that are unique and one of a kind. And I think that will it'll help us grow as more of a design place, right? Instead of the other way around. Like it would be nice to have these places where people are like, wow, Fort Collins is really known because we've got all these amazing different homes and different options. How can we help to grow that, you know?
How can people learn more about you two? Laura, where do people go to learn more about you, State Design, how they can, see maybe some of your projects and potentially work with you in the future?
Yeah, so our website is www.state.studio. No .com in there, it's just .studio. And then our Instagram is state.studio. So that's where you can see the latest and greatest. And then through our website, you can connect and reach out.
And you're working on a hotel in the Denver area. Can you share any of those details, or do you want to?
Yeah, so that's the Virgin Hotel I had mentioned. It's super exciting. It's honestly just, I've been a fan of the Virgin brands since I was like 10 years old, just through Virgin Records and listening to music. So to be able to get a client like Virgin was massive. And
do you get to meet Richard Branson?
I hope so. That's a question we all ask. I think hopefully he'll come out to Denver at some point. But yeah, we're in the design process now and just excited to an amazing team that we're with. So we're working with Tribe Architects, and then Vita is the developer down there. So it's a big development called Fox Park. It's like 41 acres of new development on the southwest corner of I-25 and I-70. So it's going to be kind of like a new cornerstone going into the city.
Wow. On
the north end of downtown. So super excited about that. And yeah, just grateful to be a part of that project.
Well, just taking that, I mean, it's incredible. Congratulations on getting selected for that job.
Thank you so much.
A really, really big deal. People can watch that. I mean, it's a big project. You'll see it going up if you're down in that area. But how you take your unique design, your creative ability to kind of just understand a space, curate the things, and just make it special, you bring that to residential. So I hope people will check out your website, see some of your work there. And Sean, how can we find you?
So we have a website, it's Tomlinson Designs, which is plural.com. And then we have social media as well on Instagram. That is not my big thing. I think I'm the age where my kids do it. They're there. We do it as an office, and we like to engage with people that way as well. But our website is a great spot, and then it has links to all of our social media pieces as well to get there. And I think our Instagram is probably more of our posting aspect of seeing ongoing projects and things. The website's a great collection of what we've done, not as much as progress, where the Instagram has more of and the Instagram's Tomlinson Designs as well. Okay. That's more of an ongoing with stories and things happening and stuff. To me, it's a nice way of being able to push activities as they're going. And as they're happening to people. And like I said, I'm not the big social media thing. And I know that you use it really well.
I hope.
Yeah. But I think it's a good little insight into how we work and how we do things. And then the website, that's finished products, right? See the stuff that's happened, how we work, a little design philosophy, our stage and phases of design and pieces too.
Well, that's great. And if anyone listening wants to ask any questions about these two, get more details, you can reach out to me as well, Greg at sellingfortcollins.com. Happy to make an introduction, but I couldn't be happier that you two agreed to sit down and talk about this. I think it's going to help people. I think they're going to get a lot out of it. I hope I dissuaded some people from going it themselves and maybe save them some stress, some money, and hopefully help them get to a place, with their eventual project, whether they're doing something now or will be in the future, that they're happy with. And that's what you two are great at, just helping people get to that place. So thank you again. I hope people will check out your website, and we'll have all of this content out on social media, and look forward to keeping in touch. So cheers, guys.